Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Newshour, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lynn. Namaskar. Coming up in the next hour. The Financial Action Task Force recognizes India's efforts to mitigate money laundering and terror financing. India is seen as a country with high level of technical compliance.
Has also been placed in regular follow-up category, which is a distinction shared by only 4 other G20 countries. So it's a positive outcome for India as far as this F.A.T.F mutual evaluation is concerned.
India's parliament is adjourned till Monday. The lower house sees a ruckus over the national eligibility cum entrance test issue. Iranians vote for a new president. All candidates had been cleared by the Guardian Council. The first debate for the November 5 US presidential elections leaves voters worried about age-related issues. President Biden and former President Trump spar over the economy, immigration, and abortion rights. And debris from a broken Russian satellite forces Sunita Williams and other astronauts into an emergency shelter at the International Space Station. India has achieved a remarkable outcome in the mutual evaluation which was conducted by the Financial Action Task Force in 2023-2024. So India has been placed among the regular follow-up countries along with just 4 other G20 peers. India's performance brings substantial economic benefits, highlighting robust stability and integrity of its financial system. Let's look at this report. The Financial Action Task Force has recognized India's efforts to combat money laundering and terrorist financing. The F.A.T.F plenary in Singapore between June 26 and 28 discussed and adopted India's mutual evaluation report. They concluded that India has reached a high level of technical compliance with the F.A.T.F requirements. India's anti-money laundering AML, countering the financing of terrorism CFT, and counter-proliferation financing CPF regime is achieving good results.
What we urge countries to do is essentially, put in place the necessary legislative frameworks, and it's important for them to also learn of each other, because there are some countries that are more advanced in this space, and actually there's a lot that can be learned from the countries that have actually progressed in their legislation. But very importantly, I also want to stress that having the legislation in place is not sufficient. What is really important is then fully and effectively implementing the legislation.
India needs to reduce delays relating to money laundering prosecutions, but these are matters of the law taking its course. India is in the regular follow-up category shared by just 4 other G20 countries.
India has also been placed in regular follow-up category, which is a distinction shared by only 4 other G20 countries. So it's a positive outcome for India as far as this F.A.T.F mutual evaluation is concerned.
FATF has recognized India's efforts in mitigating risks of laundering proceeds from corruption, fraud, and organized crime. India's effective measures to transition from a cash-based to a digital economy to reduce money laundering and terror financing risks could be an example for the global south.
We are also, urging, countries that have good and strong capabilities and high capacity to lean forward to help these less developed countries. So the overall aim, is to essentially push up and level up the capabilities and capacity of countries across the global network.
The FATF mutual evaluation demonstrates the stability and integrity of India's financial system. Good ratings encourage better access to global financial markets and institutions and increase investor confidence. It would lead to the global expansion of India's unified payments interface. India has been a member of FATF since 2010. Bureau Report, DD India. And the international crime watchdog, the Financial Action Task Force, has removed Turkey, or Turkiye, from its grey list of countries that require special scrutiny on Friday. The latest move came after an FATF team had held meetings with the Turkish authorities to assess the progress in addressing those concerns. The Paris-based body announced that Turkey has made substantial strides in enhancing its anti-money laundering and counter-financing of terrorism measures. Consequently, Turkey is no longer under the FATF's increased monitoring process. In response to the US State Department's 2023 Religious Freedom Report, India's Ministry of External Affairs said that the report is one-sided and the projection of facts are driven by vote bank politics.
Human rights and respect for diversity have been and remain a legitimate subject of discussion between India and the United States. In 2023, India has officially taken up numerous cases in the US of hate crimes, racial attacks on Indian nationals and other minorities, vandalization and targeting of places of worship, violence and mistreatment by law enforcement authorities, as well as the according of political space to advocates of extremism and terrorism abroad. However, such dialogue should not become a license for foreign interference in other polities.
Now news from what's happened in India's Parliament today. Well, the proceedings in both houses of Parliament, the lower house is known as the Lok Sabha and the upper house is known as the Rajya Sabha, were repeatedly stalled throughout the day, though the upper house saw some legislative business by way of a discussion on the motion of thanks to the President's address being held. Coming to what happened in the Lok Sabha today, and the House repeated adjournments over the NEET issue. The opposition members shouted slogans calling for the resignation of India's Education Minister, Dharmendra Pradhan, over the NEET issue, and they even trooped into the well of the House, rejecting the opposition's demand for a discussion on the NEET issue. The Parliamentary Affairs Minister, Kiren Rijiju, said that there has not been a tradition to allow any discussion during the period when a discussion on the motion of thanks to the President's address is being held in both houses of Parliament. As the ruckus prevailed, the House was adjourned for the day. Well, the Rajya Sabha also witnessed a ruckus over the NEET issue, but amid the ruckus, the leader of the House, the J.P. Nadda, asserted that the government is ready to listen to and reply on the NEET issue. However, the opposition's intention was to disrupt the proceedings of the House. The Rajya Sabha took up a discussion on the motion of thanks to the President's address amidst this opposition ruckus on the NEET issue. And a total of 21 hours has been allotted for this discussion. Finally, in the evening, the Rajya Sabha was adjourned for the day, and it's going to begin on Monday once again. The US President Joe Biden and the former President Donald Trump had their first face-off in the 2024 election cycle. Besides hurling personal remarks at each other, their debate touched topics like economy, immigration, foreign policy and abortion rights. The stakes were high as both men came face to face for the first time in almost 4 years to try and convince voters that they should back them on the 5th of November. This is the second time that Biden, a Democrat, and Trump, a Republican, have challenged each other for the White House after Trump lost in 2020. And people have reacted to the US presidential debate, calling it a little funny and a little sad.
I feel like both were like it was high school. They were both going back and forth. It was like throwing jabs at each other. We're not here for that. We're here for the American people, and we need to make that known, and we need to be voting as such. So I don't feel like yesterday's debate really helped us.
Yeah, I watched it on my phone on the bus home from work last night.
What did you think about it?
I thought it was a little funny and a little sad.
Why funny?
Just when they were arguing about their golf handicap, it was kind of ridiculous. You know, a little funny with some of the stumbles and stuff, but obviously sad because it's a serious matter as well. And, you know, 300 million person country, the only two guys we can get, so.
I didn't watch the entire debate. I just watched maybe about 20, 25 minutes of it, to be honest.
Why did you stop watching?
A lot of ranting. Nothing was being talked about that was important. With all due respect, it was hard to understand the president. And the other guy was just rambling off. Nothing tangible, concrete on his end. It was just, this is what I, but there was no results from the I or the Y. And it, I just saw it and I just decided to change the TV.
I'm a Trump supporter because of his ideas and the way he has run the country in the past. But I also wanted to hear President Biden, what he had to say this time, even though I've seen and hear what he's been going through these 3 years that he's been in presidency. But I wanted to hear him himself see my own eyes yesterday, and I was not happy. And so at the moment, I think I know who I'm going to lean toward to vote for.
Well, DD India correspondent Caroline Malone is now joining us from Washington, D.C. on this story. Well, Caroline, do the Democrats, have an alternative in case Biden steps down at this stage of the election?
Well, nothing officially has been declared at this point. Biden is very much still the candidate that they want to be running forward. But after that poor showing in the debate last night, there has been a huge amount of discussion among Democrats about whether it's time to replace Biden and put up a different candidate, even though we're just over 4 months away from the election. It is possible to do that, and some of the candidates that could potentially be considered include, of course, the Vice President, Kamala Harris. She came out after the debate and supported Biden, the president. She said it was a slow start, but he was strong by the end. We also had the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, criticizing Trump in the debate and talking about the lies that he put forward and the danger that he presents to the country. He's another potential candidate for the Democratic Party, although nothing officially has been declared. Now, because it's so tight with timing, there are some important deadlines coming up. The actual Democratic National Convention, when they formally declare who the candidate is in August. That's happening in Iowa, and that state has a deadline of August 7th to declare all the candidates. Basically, that means we have 40 days until, if the Democrats decide to have an alternative, they have to formally declare that before that deadline. Now, if that goes forward, then clearly we will be looking at alternatives, and really anything could happen in the Democratic Party at this point, given Biden's poor showing in the debate.
Also, Caroline, any news on Trump's running mate? How is his choice, expected to impact the race?
Well, originally Trump had suggested that he would announce his vice presidential candidate at the Republican National Convention. That's happening in July, so only in a few weeks' time. However, there is now a suggestion that announcement might come even earlier, as soon as next week. Trump has also got a huge sentencing date due to happen in July. He's due to receive the sentencing for his 34 guilty counts of business falsification of records in New York. So potentially his campaign has decided it's in their interest to bring that announcement forward. And in terms of the candidates themselves, there are a number out there that could be considered. Among them, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott. He is a black man that has spoken quite openly about the end of racism, how he views the Trump being the best candidate and has been a strong supporter of him for many months. We've also got North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who has done very well for his economy and his state. He was an original presidential candidate, but dropped out earlier in the race. Then we've got people like Marco Rubio from Florida. Florida, a very strong state in support of Republicans. So really, a number of strong candidates, and the potential here that we could hear this vice presidential nominee as soon as next week.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Caroline Malone, joining us from Washington, D.C. And still to come here on DD India News Hour. Efforts are on to make up lost ground as the incumbent Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, hopes to turn the tide in the run-up to his elections in the UK. And the right-wing leader Le Pen has castigated the former President Macron for his comments against the right-wing voters. She's reminded him that he's the president for all French people. Israeli forces face intense clash with Hamas operatives in Gaza.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. Well, the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said on Friday that he was hurt and angry that a supporter of Nigel Farage's right-wing Reform UK party had been recorded making a racial slur about him, saying that it was too important for him not to speak out. Sunak, Britain's first ethnic minority Prime Minister, was responding to comments broadcast by Channel 4 News by a man named as Andrew Parker for using a British racial slur for Sunak, and these are usually reserved for people of South Asian descent.
Yeah, when my two daughters have to see and hear Reform people who campaign for Nigel Farage calling me an effing packy, it hurts and it makes me angry, and I think he has some questions to answer. And I don't repeat those words lightly. You know, I do so deliberately because this is too important not to call out clearly for what it is.
And with an update on what's happening in the UK polls, we have with us Ollie Barrett, who's joining us from London. Ollie, you know, is this an election where some of the other parties besides Labour and Tories are expected to do well?
Mark, it is one in which that may happen, and one of those parties is Reform UK, the party now facing those allegations that Rishi Sunak, we were hearing from there, is so angry about, and about which Reform has faced so much criticism. But before all of this happened, certainly the polling was suggesting that Reform could bring home 15–20% of the vote at the election on Thursday, something like that. But remember that the first past the post constituency system here in the UK doesn't necessarily mean that that would actually translate into many seats at Westminster. It could even be that Reform UK, the right of centre anti-immigration party, bring home a vote share over 10%, but not actually many MPs at all. Nigel Farage, the leader of the party, is one of those who is standing to try and get himself elected to Westminster in Clacton. In terms of the other smaller parties, the Greens again have been showing fairly well in the polls, but aren't expected to get very many, if any, MPs at Westminster at all under the first past the post system. One smaller party that may do much better than last time around is the Liberal Democrats. The polling suggests they could bring home as many as 50 seats in Parliament for their leader, Ed Davey. They were always the traditional, or for a long time, the traditional third party in British politics, but lost that mantle in the last election. And it looks like, according to the polling, that they may well be recovering somewhat in that regard. So, yes, several of the smaller parties are worth keeping an eye on for different reasons.
Also, Ollie, you know, how long has Labour been in opposition now? And does the UK system of having a shadow cabinet, you know, give the electorate a better idea of, you know, what chances the opposition has if they ever get into government?
It's a really interesting question about the shadow cabinet, because in one sense, yes, and so some of those figures that have been in Keir Starmer's shadow cabinet for Labour are well-known faces on the political scene. Rachel Reeves, the shadow chancellor, is perhaps foremost amongst them. Angela Rayner, the deputy leader of the party. But whenever you look at polling of the wider British electorate and population, you do find that actually the name recognition of some of those opposition politicians is really quite low, and it's not until they get into government in some of the big jobs in government that perhaps they become household names. But it does at least give them the experience of shadowing their opposite number on their brief, and therefore potentially able to move into government in a role that they've started to understand really quite well, assuming of course Keir Starmer, if he becomes Prime Minister, keeps them in that same role as they move into a government position. In terms of Labour having been out of power, it was 2010 that Labour was last in government, led by Gordon Brown after he had taken over from Tony Blair. Labour had been in power from 1997 until 2010, so 13 years of Labour, and then 14 years since then of Conservative-led government of one form or another. And I say that because from 2010 to 2015 we had a coalition government in this country of the Conservatives and the Liberal Democrats. But you can see that 13-year stretch of Labour, that 14-year stretch of the Conservatives, sometimes that's enough for the electorate, and sometimes you hit an election like this one and it seems that for many voters they just want something different. They want to give someone else a go in terms of running the country, and all of the polling still suggests that Labour are way out in front. That could still change. All of the usual caveats apply. The Conservatives insist they are still fighting for this election. But unless something hugely significant happens, or there is something hugely wrong in the polls, then it does look like some of those shadow cabinet ministers you mentioned will be moving into government posts come the end of next week and the week after that.
Well, Ollie Barrett in London, thanks very much. The European Union, the leaders there have nominated Ursula von der Leyen for a second term as the President of the European Commission during a summit in Brussels. Alongside her nomination, Antonio Costa has been selected as the chair for the future European Council meetings, and Kaja Kallas is set to become the next EU foreign policy chief. Meanwhile, the Kremlin has expressed a bleak outlook for the future of EU-Russia relations under the current dispensation.
European Union leaders have reached a consensus to nominate Ursula von der Leyen for a second term as President of the European Commission, alongside selecting Antonio Costa as the future chair of the European Council meetings and Kaja Kallas as the next EU foreign policy chief. The decision highlights a commitment to continuity in EU leadership amid recent electoral gains by far-right parties in the European Parliament.
I would plain and simply like to express my gratitude to the leaders who endorsed my nomination for a second mandate as President of the European Commission.
My aim is definitely to work for the European unity, protect European interests, values in the charged geopolitical context, and build global partnerships as well.
The selections have sparked controversy as right-wing Italian leader Giorgia Meloni and Viktor Orban voiced opposition to the appointments.
I think
that the proposal formulated by the Conservatives, Socialist and Liberal parties was a mistake in its merit and method. In its merit, because it was not even vaguely anticipated by a discussion on what the mandate should be for those who hold these posts following elections in which European citizens clearly asked for a new and different line for the European Union.
The nominations signal a consolidation of power among centrist factions within the EU, despite challenges posed by populist movements across the continent. In the meantime, Russia has expressed a bleak outlook for the future of EU-Russia relations.
Mrs. von der Leyen is not a supporter of normalizing relations between the EU and Russia. That's how we know her. That's how we remember her. In this regard, nothing changes. Mrs. Kallas has not demonstrated diplomatic inclinations until now, and is well known among us for her absolutely irreconcilable and sometimes even rabidly Russophobic statements.
Von der Leyen's nomination still needs approval from the European Parliament in a secret ballot, widely seen as a trickier proposition than her endorsement by EU leaders. With Bureau Inputs, Ravindra Chauhan's report for DD India.
Well, the French far-right party, the National Rally, has a chance of winning as much as 37% of the popular vote, as per an opinion poll. The National Rally was up 2 percentage points from the last publication of the poll, which Macron's centrist bloc was seen reaching 20% of the popular vote. The far-right National Rally leader, Le Pen, has accused Macron of humiliating people who did not vote or do not vote for him.
Emmanuel Macron is being excessive. He's still president of the Republic and he will still be tomorrow. Therefore, he's president of all French people. I think the way in which he seeks to somehow insult those who aren't voting for him does not fit the idea that I have of the position of a president of the Republic who must in all circumstances remain the president of all French people, including those who aren't voting for his campaign.
In the run-up to the first round of French elections on Sunday, President Macron has said that the far-right National Rally is taking the electorate for granted, stressing that the French values must be protected at any cost.
What lies in the uninhabited discourse of the last few days, the racism, the uninhabited anti-Semitism is a profound betrayal of what France is, its values, our republic and its values. And we need to fight that with strength, and it should make us angry because this isn't a question of politics or voting, but the very ability to live together.
Iranians turned out in significant numbers today to cast their votes in an accelerated presidential election prompted by the unexpected death of Ibrahim Raisi, a prominent figure in Iranian politics. Raisi, who tragically lost his life in a helicopter crash earlier this year, had been a pivotal candidate in the upcoming election cycle. DD India's Rahul Upadhyay gets us more.
Iranians have voted on Friday in a consequential presidential election prompted by the tragic death of Ibrahim Raisi earlier this year in a helicopter crash. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei urged voters to go to the polling stations as he cast his vote at the start of the country's presidential election.
Election day is a time of great joy and excitement for us Iranians, especially during a presidential election when the people's vote will determine our president for the coming years. The longevity, stability and reputation and honor of the Islamic Republic depends on the people's participation.
6 candidates from over 80 hopefuls survived screening by the Iranina Guardian Council, a panel of clerics and jurists which is overseen by the supreme leader. The election coincides with escalating regional tension due to war between Israel and Iranian allies, Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon, as well as increased Western pressure on Iran over its fast advancing nuclear program. While the election is unlikely to bring a major shift in the Islamic Republic's policies, its outcome could influence the succession to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Iran's 85-year-old supreme leader in power since 1989. Rahul Upadhyay's report for DD India.
Azerbaijan will hold a snap parliamentary election on September 1, according to a decree by the President Ilham Aliyev, which was published on Friday. Aliyev, who has been in power since 2003, recently won a snap presidential election, and his new Azerbaijan party is expected to maintain its majority. Critics argue that opposition figures face persecution, with several independent journalists and political activists arrested before the presidential vote, which Aliyev won with over 92% of the vote. The Israeli army released footage on Friday showing aerial strikes and tanks advancing into Gaza's Sheaja neighborhood. This sparked intense clashes with Hamas operatives, and the Israeli military described the operation as a targeted raid, stating that they hit numerous Hamas military sites in the area. Still to come here on DD India News Hour, we'll discuss the F.A.T.F report on India's high compliance with an expert. Also, JP Morgan backs India's bonds. They strengthen India's external finances. And India's Education Minister responds to the NEET paper leak issue.
Voice of a rising aspirational world. Stories of challenges, struggles and accomplishment. A world battling conflict, hunger and poverty. Embracing growth, development, science and technology. A voice of progress, a voice of unity. Watch Voice of the Global South with me, Akshay Dongre, only on DD India.
You're watching DD India Newshour. I'm Mark Lynn. Here's a recap of our main stories. The Financial Action Task Force has recognized India's efforts to mitigate money laundering and terror financing. India is seen as a country with high level of technical compliance. Iranians vote for a new president. All candidates had been cleared by the Guardian Council. And debris from a broken Russian satellite forces Sunita Williams and other astronauts in the International Space Station to go into an emergency shelter. And Ambassador Mohan Kumar, now former senior diplomat, expert on geoeconomics, joins us from Greater Noida. We are going to talk about India's high level of compliance in FATF. Thank you very much, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. Now, how does, in fact, India's high compliance, or FATF compliance, help in India's continued rise or emergence as a major economic player?
Thank you very much, Mark, for having me. No, it makes a huge difference. First of all, it is an acknowledgement that India is making a solid contribution to the health of the international financial system. And you cannot say that you are the fifth largest economy on the cusp of becoming the third largest economy and not make a contribution to the financial health of the world. So that is the first point. The second, it makes a big difference because India has been showcasing its digital public infrastructure. And if you want your UPI system, the Unified Payment Interface System, to spread in the neighborhood, but also to the world, then you need to be very clear that you have put in place a regulatory framework and you are taking measures to combat three things. One, money laundering. Second, terrorist financing. And the third, which is slightly less relevant for India, which is proliferation financing. So what the FATF report has done is effectively given a clean chit to India by making India just a regular follow-up country. We are now only among 4 countries out of the G20 who have received this distinction from the FATF. So our access to financial markets becomes better. Investor confidence in India becomes much better. But the most important, I would say, is it holds tremendous promise for India's spread of digital public infrastructure, which we have been talking about since the Delhi G20 summit.
Okay, taking that further, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, how can India actually share its best practices with countries of the Global South to improve the overall FATF compliance?
No, I think in our region, you will remember Pakistan had a problem. And then, of course, other countries don't have the same level of compliance. What the FATF's mutual evaluation report does, it does 2 things. One, the measures that you have put in place for countering money laundering and terrorist financing, they evaluate that. And this is done in collaboration between the Department of Revenue in India and the FATF authorities in Paris. This takes 2 years, and this is the result of a 2-year cooperation, and that is why it's called Mutual Evaluation Report. But to answer your question, other countries can learn from the regulatory framework that we have put in. In fact, I'll be honest with you, I think the fact that India has relied less and less on cash transactions, more and more on UPI, that itself contributes to transparency and it contributes to better compliance, because corruption, the kind of money laundering, the kind of illegal transfers, everything comes down. The moment you get rid of cash transactions, you actually make a big step in terms of transparency and compliance. So other countries in the neighborhood and even those afar can learn a lot from two things. One, the regulatory framework, the legislation that we have put in, but also the actual measures put in place by Government of India over the last 10 years to counter terrorist financing and money laundering. I think those could be very, very valuable lessons for other countries.
So, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, in the multilateral world order, how effective is the FATF actually as a body? What happens, if countries cease to be compliant? Can they effectively be sanctioned or put in their place?
Actually, it's a good question. And my frank assessment is that it's actually much better than many of the other multilateral fora. Because if you get a blacklist or a grey list, which is what Pakistan got for several years, what happens is the FATF doesn't have to do anything. The moment they say you are on the grey list or a blacklist, international financial investors will develop cold feet. They will not look to your country to invest. So that is the sanction. The sanction is not by the FATF. You need the FATF clean sheet in order to access international financial markets, in order to develop investor confidence. So if you don't have the FATF clean sheet, it actually works against you and you have trouble accessing international financial markets. That is effectively the leverage that FATF enjoys vis-a-vis countries.
A final question, Dr. Mohan Kumar. How best can countries improve the prosecution they have, against money laundering? Because there are so many tax havens that still provide sanctuaries to offenders.
No, that's a terribly important question. I have the entire answer. I think there are improvements which are happening incrementally by FATF and others. But if you ask me very frankly, is there 100% compliance? Obviously not. But I think the world has realized that if you cut off financing and if you remove money laundering, then a lot of these illegal activities can be attacked. They happen because of financing, because otherwise it's simply impossible for terrorism or money laundering to happen on this scale. So I'm afraid eternal vigilance is the answer. I think important progress has been made, and I think we have to keep working in order to achieve the objective of zero tolerance for terrorist financing and money laundering.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, former senior diplomat. Thank you for joining us and enlightening us on this subject. Now, moving on to our next story, the inclusion of India's sovereign or government bonds in JP Morgan's Emerging Markets Bond Index comes as a major boost to the country's economy. A sovereign bond is a debt or a debt security, in fact, which is issued by a national government to raise money for its operations. And JP Morgan's Emerging Market Bond Index, this is most widely referenced as an index for emerging market bonds. And the inclusion will be spread over 10 months until March 31st, 2025. It's going to help India to manage its external finances and boost foreign exchange reserves. The move is also going to help raise funding from foreign investors. Deepening of the bond market will allow the government to diversify its source of borrowings and bring down risks. India has imposed anti-dumping duties on 3 Chinese products, including hydraulic rock breaker, with an aim to protect domestic players from cheap imports. The steps to impose duties between the range of 4.55% and 162.5% were taken following a recommendation by the Commerce Ministry's Directorate General of Trade Remedies. According to the notification, the duty imposed on hydraulic rock breakers, which are used in construction, will be effective for 5 years. In financial terms, dumping happens when a country exports its products at a lower price than the domestic market or the cost in the domestic market. So, Pakistan's parliament on Friday has passed the government's tax-heavy finance bill for the coming financial year amid an annual inflation projection of up to 13.5% for June. And the bill, it comes ahead of more talks with the International Monetary Fund for a loan of $6 billion to $8 billion to avert a debt default for Pakistan, the slowest growing economy in South Asia. The Finance Minister, Mohammad Aurangzeb, has moved the finance bill in Parliament, which was opened to seek amendments and debate by the ruling alliance led by Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif and its opposition. In the wake of the recent controversies surrounding the National Eligibility Cum Entrance Test for medical undergraduates and also for subsequent cancellation of the UGC NET due to issues of lack of integrity, India's Union Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan has said that a discussion must take place within tradition and decorum.
किसी भी प्रकार की चर्चा के लिए तैयार है, लेकिन सब परंपरा और मर्यादा के अंदर होनी चाहिए। जब कल परम आदरणीय राष्ट्रपति महोदया जी ने अपने प्रारंभिक भाषण में परीक्षा के ऊपर खुद ही एड्रेस किया, ये सरकार की इंटेंशन को प्रतीत करती है कि हम कोई भी विषय को सामना करने के लिए प्रस्तुत है, जो तथ्य हम समाज में रखना चाहते हैं।
Let's take a look at other stories making the news. After persistent scorching heat, India's national capital received heavy rain accompanied by thunder showers and lightning on Friday. The rainfall has caused significant disruption on major roads and underpasses as several areas in and around the national capital were waterlogged, posing significant challenges for commuters. The India Meteorological Department forecast that this weather pattern is going to continue over the next few days. The All India Institute of Medical Sciences, Delhi, 9 operation theatres over there had remained closed because of heavy rain, and dozens of surgeries were also affected. 6 months after he was arrested on money laundering charges, the former Jharkhand Chief Minister Hemant Soren was released from jail after the Jharkhand High Court had granted him bail on Friday. Soren is facing money laundering charges linked to illegal possession of 8.36 acres of land. Soren was arrested on January 31 after he resigned from his post. The Maharashtra government has announced a financial assistance scheme entailing a monthly allowance of 1,500 rupees to eligible women in the age group of 21 to 60 years of age in the state budget for the year 2024-25. Education also received significant attention, with free higher education for girls from economically weaker sections and other backward classes. The Jammu and Kashmir Lieutenant Governor Manoj Sinha flagged off the first batch of Amarnath Yatra pilgrims from the base camp in Jammu on Friday. In the backdrop of a recent spate of terror attacks, the civil and police administration, they have made unprecedented arrangements in terms of security, logistics, registration and other facilities to ensure a peaceful, incident-free and memorable experience for the pilgrims. Still to come here on DD India Newshour, India is going to take on South Africa to determine who's going to be the World T20 cricket champions.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
You're watching DD India Newshour. I'm Mark Lynn. Well, the return of the astronauts Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore, it faces further delays with no new date announced by NASA. Williams' return was initially scheduled for June 13th and later postponed to the 26th of June. Reports have revealed that NASA and Boeing were aware of a helium leak on the Starliner spacecraft before the launch, but chose to proceed regardless. While NASA is still figuring out a way to get them back safely, it has urgently asked everyone to take the mission to take shelter in Boeing's Starliner spaceship as a Russian satellite, broke into pieces and the debris came close to the International Space Station. India's premier institution, the Indian Institute of Technology Madras, or IIT Madras, has launched the world's first MBA program in digital maritime and supply chain. So IIT Madras anticipates a multi-trillion-dollar shipping and port management industry in the next few years, of which 30 to 40% will come from the maritime sector. Addressing the launch of the event, the IIT Madras's director, Professor Kamakoti, he said that the goal of this cutting-edge program is to improve professionals and entrepreneurs' ability to navigate the intricacies of contemporary supply chain and maritime industries.
When we look at Viksit Bharat 2047, there is a need for technical managers in the area of maritime. India is surrounded by ocean on all the three sides, and we have a significant contribution to the economy from maritime related business. It can be just shipment of cargoes, but it can be also tourism, etc.
In a survey conducted about business expectations of German companies in India by KPMG in Germany and the Indo-German Chamber of Commerce, nearly 6 in 10 German companies are planning to increase their investments in India during the current financial year. The managing director of AHK India, Stefan Halusa, highlighted the enormous potential of India emerging as a location for regional production as well as global development.
Ask for the positive factors why the companies are investing. I mean, of course, the growth is the main driver for planning it. What they see, especially in comparison with other countries, it is still the low labor cost, although with decreasing importance, very clearly. It is the political stability that, of course, now was confirmed with recent elections, so that will then also ensure, I would say, that the plans will be continued to develop. And it is the availability of highly qualified personnel, which again corresponds obviously with the planning of setting up global capability centers.
Bangladesh received $1.15 billion from the International Monetary Fund. On Thursday, this marks the third tranche of a $4.7 billion loan package. Besides the IMF funds, Bangladesh also received around $900 million from other sources, including the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Since the middle of 2022, the Bangladesh economy has been facing a crisis. To mitigate the liquidity and forex issues, Bangladesh took preventive steps and reached out to the International Monetary Fund and other international lenders to avert a meltdown. The Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh, Pranay Verma, on Thursday said that closer engagement between the media of India and Bangladesh is important in shaping a positive narrative of the New Delhi-Dhaka partnership oriented towards shared values and aspirations. The High Commissioner was speaking at a special interactive session with members of the Diplomatic Correspondents Association of Bangladesh at the Indian High Commission in Dhaka in the context of a special training program organized by the Government of India for them. The first batch of 20 DCAB members visited India on a week-long program in May. The training program for DCAB members is part of a long tradition of multifaceted capacity-building exchanges between India and Bangladesh. India's Dr. Usha Thakur was awarded with the 12th Vishwa Hindi Samman Award for her countless contributions to the Hindi language and to spread awareness about the language in the world. Dr. Usha Thakur was awarded the 12th Vishwa Hindi Samman in a Hindi Samvad event which was organized by the Embassy of India in Nepal, recognizing her contribution in the development of Hindi literature and honoring her contribution in development and spread of the Hindi language. The Indian Navy bid farewell to the UH-3H helicopter after 17 years of glorious service during a de-induction ceremony held at the INS Dega, Visakhapatnam on the 28th of June, 2024. The event was presided over by the Vice Admiral Samir Saxena, the Chief of Staff of the Eastern Naval Command. Veteran officers and sailors of the UH-3H squadron graced the event with families reminiscing the yeoman service of the helicopter. The UH-3H helicopter will be replaced by Sea King 42C helicopter at INAS 350 to continue and deliver operational power and capability. Some more news from around the world now. In Chile, a polar cold wave has hit the coastal city of Punta Arenas, freezing off the water supplies for the residents. The city witnessed a record temperature of minus 14.7 degrees Celsius. The cold wave is set to continue for another week. Wall Street opened higher on Friday as a report closely watched the Federal Reserve as it showed inflation moderating in line with expectations, strengthening hopes for early interest rate cuts this year. The S&P 500 opened higher by 5.61 points and the Nasdaq Composite gained 32 points. Argentina's lower house has approved economic reform measures proposed by the President Javier Milei on Friday. The approval also included a fiscal package which reintroduced articles on income tax and personal assets that the Senate had in fact previously rejected. K-pop group 17. They are poised to make history as the first K-pop group to perform at the Glastonbury Festival. The 13-member band will be performing on the Pyramid stage on Friday, where fellow stars including the pop singer Dua Lipa, the rock band Coldplay and the US rhythm and blues artist SZA are headlining. Let's get to the sports news now. In the T20 Cricket World Cup, India, they have advanced to the final after a gap of 10 years. The Rohit Sharma-led side secured a commanding 68-run win over England in the second semi-final in Guyana on Thursday. India have set up a summit clash with South Africa on Saturday, and it's an encounter between the tournament's two unbeaten sides.
The demolition act by India as they thumped defending champion England to reach T20 World Cup final after a gap of 10 years. The Rohit Sharma-led side notched up a commanding 68-run win over England in the rain-interrupted second semi-final in Guyana. Rain and a wet outfield delayed start of the match, and England captain Jos Buttler elected to field after winning the toss. India posted a strong 171 for 7 with skipper Rohit Sharma staring off in whirlwind fashion. They managed 46 runs from the 6 power play overs, and it cost them the wickets of Virat Kohli and Rishabh Pant. Sharma and Surya Kumar Yadav scored bulk of the runs on a slow track in Guyana. The 2007 champions then returned to bundle out England for 103 inside 17 overs with their spin duo of Akshar Patel and Kuldeep Yadav wreaking havoc. Akshar Patel dented England's chase with figures of 3 for 23, while Kuldeep Yadav also picked 3 for 19.
It feels very good when you perform and team wins, and I think not a good idea to perform on a knockout match and you got a man of the match. So obviously feeling good, and I'm feeling good about that. We win the match when you perform, and if team doesn't do well, then it doesn't matter. So I think feeling good. We close to the one step and close to the trophy. So yeah, feeling good.
India have set up a summit clash with South Africa, who outplayed Afghanistan by 9 wickets in the first semi-final. It will be a clash of the tournament's two unbeaten sides in Bridgetown on Saturday.
India's deaf cricket team created history by defeating England on their soil. India won the 7-match T20 series 5-2 And in the 7th match of the series, India won the toss and invited England to bat first. England scored 164 runs after losing 4 wickets in the stipulated 20 overs. In reply, the Indian team didn't have a good start, but they were reduced to 46 for the loss of 3 wickets. But Abhishek Singh and Umar Ashraf then added 95 runs, which helped India win the match by 6 wickets in 19.2 overs. Abhishek Singh, who scored an unbeaten 68 runs, was chosen as the player of the match. That's all we have in this edition of DD India News Hour. Let's know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those of you on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. Scan the QR code on the screen and download it now. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. My name is Mark Lin from all of us here in Delhi. Thank you very much for watching DD India News Hour. Namaskar.